Good morning, it's just after 5:30 on Friday the 18th of February. Welcome to ITN's Morning News, the headlines today. The government claims credit for Russian peace move in Bosnia. The Serbs pull back their weapons from around Sarajevo. And New Yorkers lose millions of dollars when bank computer goes mad. Western countries have cautiously welcomed reports that the Bosnian Serbs are withdrawing their siege weapons from around Sarajevo. The Serbs say their guns will be out of NATO's exclusion zone by tomorrow lunchtime, well ahead of the Sunday night deadline for airstrikes. The Russians are sending 400 troops to Sarajevo and are claiming the credit for the peace move. But in the Commons last night, the government claimed Mr. Major helped arrange the deal when he met Boris Yeltsin in Moscow.
President Yeltsin privately gave the Prime Minister advance notice that he was going to send a personal emissary, Deputy Minister Churkin, to meet the Serbs, and that Russia might be prepared to deploy additional troops to Sarajevo to control heavy weapons. The Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary did everything they could to encourage this, and so today's news that the Russians have made some progress is seen as a most welcome development, arising as it did directly from the talks in Moscow.
The Foreign Secretary Douglas Hurd says Russia has combined with NATO to give Britain's UN commander in Bosnia what he needs. The European Union peace envoy Lord Owen has also welcomed Russia's involvement, saying the Bosnian Serbs won't dare to double-cross Moscow. But the Bosnian government is furious because once the Russians are on the hills around Sarajevo, NATO won't be able to mount airstrikes. Here's our diplomatic editor, James Mates.
While NATO was threatening, the Russians were persuading, and it seems the gentler form of diplomacy has worked.
We have accepted the proposal and request of Russia concerning withdrawal of heavy weaponry.
In return, the Serbs will have their Russian allies helping to keep the peace in Sarajevo.
In that context, the Russian Federation would be prepared to send its troops to the Sarajevo area to participate in the UN peacekeeping operation.
It is clearly a breakthrough. Having the Russians join the UN peacekeepers will reassure the Serbs because it'll make it harder for NATO to launch airstrikes. The British say they were expecting a Russian initiative and are delighted at the outcome.
This fits in admirably, it seems to me, with the NATO initiative. They fit well together, and if this works out on the ground, there's now a much better chance than before of avoiding airstrikes because the heavy weapons will have been withdrawn or controlled.
But will the Serb leadership be as good as its word? The difference this time is that they're making promises to their friends, not their enemies.
I don't think Karadzic can make this commitment to the Russians and backtrack on it in a few days' time. He would be putting the Serbs at great risk in terms of the anger of the Russian government if he did.
The UN commander in Bosnia, General Sir Michael Rose, says he will still need more troops to monitor ceasefires and occupy areas vacated by retreating armies. But Britain will be providing just 60 more men to operate Cymbeline, a radar system that detects mortar and artillery shells. It's being sent to Sarajevo so that if there is any breach of the ceasefire in future, the UN and NATO will know exactly who is responsible. In the Commons, the Prime Minister was roundly criticised for such a limited response to a UN request.
As we already have a very large contingent there, we have decided not to send an extra battalion as part of the general reinforcement.
That will be heard as music to the ears of the Serbs.
For all the optimism today, NATO's warplanes remain on standby to bomb if necessary, and the ultimatum still stands. The threat of action appears to have transformed the situation in Sarajevo, but the war goes on elsewhere in Bosnia. This may not be the last time NATO is called on to flex its muscles.
3 days before the NATO deadline expires, the UN now has a small arsenal of heavy weapons under its control. Both the Bosnian Serb and Muslim armies are withdrawing guns from the front line. Many are now in barracks guarded by UN troops with orders to resist any attempt to repossess them. The UN commander says the threatened airstrikes may not be necessary.
At the moment, everybody is complying fully with the conditions that have been laid down, and as long as they continue to do that, then of course there will be no airstrikes. And how much better it is to bring peace to Bosnia without bombing than having to do it by bombing.
Crucially today, there's been a significant movement of Serbian armour and military equipment. UN observers report convoys leaving the mountains around Sarajevo. Tomorrow, 300 soldiers from the Coldstream Guards will join what is now effectively a peacekeeping operation here. General Rose would have liked more British troops in his multinational force. Today, a battalion of Malaysian soldiers sent in to reinforce the Sarajevo garrison were finding their way around the city. Many openly admitted they weren't enjoying the climate or the risks of their first patrol.
Some of them very happy, some of them not very happy. Because we are very cold, we are very dangerous.
Many of the most demanding tasks have been given to the French troops. We visited their camp alongside the Muslim trenches on the top of Mount Zuch. In this First World War setting, some of the fiercest fighting took place. It's a bleak and lonely outpost, but the French believe their presence is helping maintain the peace.
I'm really sure that things can come to the peace without any bombing.
Tonight, the lieutenant's optimism appears well placed. The threat of airstrikes hasn't gone away, but has certainly receded.
Paul Davis, ITN, Sarajevo.
There's more mystery this morning about the death of the former spy James Rusbridger, who was found yesterday hanging from the ceiling of his West Country cottage. Last week, Mr. Rusbridger wrote to ITN about the bizarre death of Conservative MP Stephen Milligan. His letter claimed that the establishment is full of people with sexual fetishes. He included members of the royal family, television personalities, and a judge. ITN's Andrew Simmons reports.
The author and former MI6 spy was found in his remote cottage in Cornwall hanging from 2 ropes linked to a pulley system. His landlord said he was wearing a long black oilskin-type coat and gas mask. Mr. Rusbridger, a cousin of spycatcher author Peter Wright, wrote controversial books about espionage in the establishment. He had financial problems and was due to be evicted on the day his body was found. Police said there were no suspicious circumstances, but there's a new twist. A letter sent to ITN a week ago bearing Mr. Rusbridger's signature claimed he could have named celebrities and establishment figures involved in sadomasochistic fetishism. It said this type of pornography is enjoyed by professional men who hold excellent well-paid jobs and are often happily married. It is amazing the number of household names that appear, television being well represented, including at least 2 members of the royal family. His publishers said he had made many enemies during his career.
There'll be no tears shed in Whitehall these days about James, and he was a thorn in the side. He was an absolute nuisance to them. He was always after them, catching them out whenever he could.
Rusbridger's letter names this company in Lancashire. It supplies bizarre sex equipment, and the firm says his name is on their mail order list along with thousands of others.
When it comes to something like this, he's very hidden in certain people, certainly high-profile people and people in the media. Obviously, do keep a very low profile.
The secretive world of fetishism was highlighted by the death of Tory MP Stephen Milligan. In the Rusbridger letter, there is mention of his death, but it's the references to household names and members of the royal family that will ensure the speculation following Mr. Rusbridger's death is unlikely to go away.
The Prime Minister continues his visit to Scotland today and will be visiting factories and talking to Scottish businessmen. Meanwhile, the Labour Party says it's uncovered what it calls another massive Tory tax bombshell. It says the average family will be paying £22 a week extra in tax after April next year. Our political editor Michael Brunson has the details.
For some time now, Labour's been trying to make political capital out of reminding people what was clear anyway, that last year's 2 budgets means that taxes are going up for some time to come. But by how much? After teasing still more official estimates out of the Treasury by way of written parliamentary answers, Labour announced
a couple with 2 children and 1 earner are going to be paying from next April an extra £1,160 a year in tax compared to what they're paying now. Their tax bill, this typical family, is going to go up by £22.32 a week.
Here are the details based on the tax paid by a married couple with 2 children on average earnings. At present, they pay £118.36 a week in tax. From this April, that goes up to £130.88, a rise of £12.52 a week. From next April, that figure going up to £140.68, bringing the overall increase in 2 years' time to £22.32 a week. But the Treasury Minister said Labour hadn't revealed the full story behind their parliamentary question.
The question makes certain assumptions about inflation, about movements of earnings, and all of those economic variables in order to produce the answer of £22 a week. The same set of assumptions equally produces the answer that family's income goes up by £30 a week.
So, is it all just playing with figures and assumptions? Well, you must decide. But the political divide is clear, with Labour saying that most people are going to face real tax pain in the years ahead, and with the Conservatives saying that some tax pain is necessary to get the economy growing strongly again. In Northern Ireland, a middle-aged man has been shot and critically wounded in North Belfast. He was gunned down at a house near the Antrim Road. It's understood that a number of children were in the house at the time. So far, there's no word on who was behind the attack. In a separate incident in Belfast, the IRA killed a policeman and wounded 2 others in a rocket attack on their Land Rover. The province's chief constable said the attack was cowardly and vicious and difficult to square with the IRA's claim to want peace. Our island correspondent Tom Bradbury reports from Belfast.
The IUC's Land Rovers look secure, but they provide little protection against a well-aimed rocket. Beneath the covers here lies the body of William Beacom, the first IRA victim of 1994. His Land Rover was moving through the Catholic Markets area when it was ambushed using an improvised rocket launcher. Constable Beacom was critically injured and paramedics fought in vain to save his life. His 2 colleagues in hospital, all 3 were helped by local people.
Well, there was local people, of course, trying to help the injured because, we are all human beings. No one has the right to take life, no matter who it is or who they say they represent. Once more, we have a cowardly, vicious attack perpetrated by Republican terrorists. It's really very difficult to match that with the consistent claims they put forward for once a lasting peace. Very difficult to see how anybody, anywhere, can swear this with peace.
The chief constable said he did believe, on balance, the IRA was moving towards peace, but there's nothing to show for it yet. The security forces are bearing the brunt of the IRA's campaign, as indeed they have ever since the Downing Street Declaration was signed.
It's now 17 minutes to 6. You're watching the morning news from ITN. We'll take a short break now. Coming up, the Whitewater scandal that could overwhelm President Clinton.
I won't compromise on quality, but I won't pay through the nose for it. Rather than pay for a name, I often buy my shop's own brands. After all, their pasta tastes as good as any I've had in Italy. So I tried their own detergent. All made by the same people, I thought. But obviously not. On everyday things it was fine, but not always on tough oily things like chili.
After 1 wash, the shop's own brand got it this clean. After 2 washes, it was this clean.
So I switched back to Ariel, and it tackled the stain in just 1 go. So what sort of saving is it if you have to wash some things twice?
On tough chili stains, why pay for nearly clean when Ariel gets it really clean?
I know what I'll be buying in future.
You may not have realized it,
No need, then.
but if your card has a Delta sign on it, you can use it just like a check. Your account is debited in a day or 2, and you can use it wherever you see either a Visa or Delta sign, practically everywhere. It's so simple, even Chancellors of the Exchequer can manage it.
For one of the liveliest, friendliest one-to-one conversations in town, call 0898 312 888 and join in the fun.
Where would you start if you wanted to make a collection of the world's best rock tracks? You'd take bands like Rainbow, Deep Purple, Foreigner, Jethro Tull, Free, Black Sabbath, and Thin Lizzy. You'd take artists like Gary Moore, Brian May, and Alice Cooper. You'd take 100 tracks from the 100 best albums of all time, and you'd cram them all on one CD set.
You're as cold as ice.
Sounds Direct by post. So get a pen ready.
I've been driving all night, man, sweat on the wheel. Whoa, Black Betty, bam a lamp.
This 6 CD or cassette set has over 6 hours worth of original tracks. To get your copy, call now. Rock from Sounds Direct. Sounds you can't afford to miss.
Now you can cut the costs of caring for your fine china with this new money-saving refill. It's a snip. Dishwasher Fairy cuts the cost of caring.
Welcome back to ITN's Morning News. Today's top story. The government says Mr. Major helped arrange the Russian peace move in Bosnia when he saw President Yeltsin in Moscow. A man and a youth have been found guilty of killing Police Sergeant Bill Forth, who was stabbed and beaten to death while making a routine call in Gateshead. The man, Paul Weddell, got a life sentence. His 16-year-old friend, Philip English, was jailed for an indefinite period. Our North of England correspondent, Jonathan Munro, was in court.
Mrs. Jill Forth on the left has sat and watched every session of the trial of her husband's killers. She saw them convicted and imprisoned. The father of two, Sergeant Bill Forth, and a colleague, it looked like a routine call-out to a domestic argument. Paul Weddell had fallen out with his girlfriend and was threatening violence. His friend Philip English and he were wielding fence posts as weapons. Another officer was calming Weddell's girlfriend as he and English clubbed Sergeant Forth to the ground on the green outside. Then Weddell pulled out a sheath knife and stabbed him 8 times, once in the heart. After the attack, Northumbria Police became the first force in Britain to order knife-proof vests for every officer. Mrs. Forth had spoken of her fears of attacks on the police.
You have to just try. I mean, you're well aware of the situation and you just have to live with the fear. I mean, night shift week, you just know that you're not going to sleep very well.
Mrs. Forth wept loudly as the verdicts were returned. Mr. Justice Owen told her husband's murderers, "Together you did a terrible thing. You caused untold suffering. I regard crimes against police officers as particularly heinous," he said.
Mrs. Forth, are you pleased with the verdict?
Yes. As Mrs. Forth left court, Paul Weddell started a life sentence. Philip English, who was only 16, received the juvenile equivalent, detention at Her Majesty's pleasure.
A police inquiry into blackmail threats against 3 major supermarkets has led to the arrest of 2 men at a motorway service area near Bristol. The operation began several weeks ago after demands were received by Tesco, Sainsbury's and Safeway. The blackmailers threatened to contaminate their food supplies. The police say there was no risk to the public at any time. The rival American ice skaters Tonya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan have been giving each other the cold shoulder at the Winter Olympics in Norway. They practiced on the same ice for 25 minutes but did not exchange a single glance. Kerrigan was clubbed on the knee by Harding's bodyguard 6 weeks ago. It's alleged that Harding herself may have been involved. Peter Staunton reports from Norway.
They may be on the same team, but they hadn't met since the infamous attack on Nancy Kerrigan. An army of security men kept control as the U.S. media's finest search for her.
Nancy, how was your first meeting with Tanya?
Or a glimpse of her rival. But there wasn't a word from either of them.
They're both in the building, both of them. You let them in without having them talk to us?
Inside, though, there was no hiding place. What followed was the most bizarre practice session in skating history. Kerrigan took to the ice first and looked impressive until her rival turned up. After that, the routine fell apart. When they both got on the rink together, there wasn't even a glance between them as they circled each other warily. Kerrigan left early, leaving the ice to Harding. In American eyes, she's the villain of this skating soap opera. She looks to be loving every minute of it.
But as the 2 Americans kept their distance, another skating pair were doing their best to get closer together. Torvill and Dean unveiled their new routine, but it was a less than perfect performance.
They've had just 2 weeks to restructure their free skating routine. They've done an impressive job injecting more life and drama into it. But the problem is lack of practice.
They rehearsed the whole program today, but at one point Dean almost fell as he performed one of the more athletic moves. Overall, though, it was a remarkable performance. At the European Championship, their act had been criticized as conservative. Now they've thrown in just about every trick in the ice dancing manual to try and attract the judges' attention. They begin their quest for gold with the compulsory dances.
And now our special report. In America, a grand jury in Arkansas has charged one of President Clinton's long-standing supporters with telling lies over the Whitewater scandal. Whitewater is a housing development in Arkansas which Mr. Clinton approved as state governor. He and his partner Jim McDougall then put money into development and allegedly misused public funds to cover their losses. Our Washington correspondent Bill Neely reports on a scandal that could destroy the president.
Whitewater, 230 acres of Arkansas land, bought by the Clintons and their old friends, the McDougalls. Here they built houses to sell. This, the house Bill built to retire to. A good, clean deal. Or so it seemed at the time.
Well, it was an investment. I was hoping, obviously, like everybody who puts up money in a deal, I was hoping we'd make money.
You know, the pride of ownership. And
But a glitzy marketing campaign failed. The scheme collapsed. The Clintons say they lost £40,000. Now they are facing questions they seem unable to answer. The Clintons got a half share of this land, even though they didn't invest anything like half the money. When the scheme collapsed, they didn't tell the taxman about much of their loss. Curious, because the Clintons are known for claiming just about everything against tax. Last year, for example, claiming a deduction of £10 because Bill donated his used underwear to charity.
Didn't make any money. Been a headache ever since.
Jim McDougall was their Whitewater partner. He gave Bill money to help him become governor. He paid Hillary, then a top lawyer, to represent the bank he owned. The bank that was slowly collapsing, that would soon cost the American taxpayer £40 million.
Business and politics have always mixed very freely here in the state.
Too freely, perhaps.
You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Absolutely. Here it's known as the good old boy system.
Did Governor Clinton give special treatment to a failing banker who was also a business partner and a campaign contributor? Did Mrs. Clinton help?
I didn't do anything wrong. I made an investment and lost money.
Jim McDougall says he'll take a lie detector test to prove Bill Clinton did nothing illegal. Would he do the same for Hillary, he was asked.
Ask you another question about it.
We would talk with Hillary and Bill, probably really not at all.
The Whitewater estate agents say Hillary was in charge. The White House aide in charge of the Clintons' Whitewater papers was found dead last year. An apparent suicide.
One last celebration.
Vincent Foster's papers were removed from the White House before the FBI could investigate his death. Mrs. Clinton then blocked their release. The autopsy report on Foster's death has yet to be released. Paramedics say it was suspicious. Body straight on the ground, gun firmly in hand, little blood around.
I would question both the President and the First Lady, and it would be under oath.
An independent investigation of all of this is now underway to try to solve the Whitewater riddle.
The massive cover-up has been an issue.
He has nothing to hide.
Every day there's another little drip coming from somewhere.
If the Clintons have nothing to hide, that is not the impression they're giving. The Whitewater Rapids begin gently. They may have the power to carry a man away, even a president.
In New York, there's been chaos at one of the city's biggest banks after cash dispensing machines went haywire. Customers of the chemical bank found that when they withdrew cash, the machines were taking twice the right amount from each account. Around 70,000 angry people have been affected. Vic Miles of WCBS News reports.
So what happened? ChemBank says its main computer threw a fit and double-posted withdrawals on customers' ATM cards. If you took 50, the computer misused your account for 100. If you took 100, the computer doubled your withdrawal, and so on. But you couldn't tell by your ATM slip. And some customers worry they bounced checks because their accounts came up short. Chem officials say now the problem is fixed. The incident has many an ATM card holder looking askance at the easy-access, high-tech convenience.
Very scary, and if you don't keep a close eye on your account and the statements that you get back in the mail, you know, they could be taking a lot of money from us without us knowing.
The ATM glitch hit only ChemBank account holders, and only in New York City. Still, we're talking 1 million or more customers, some of whom are willing to forgive and sort of write off the glitch to living in today's world. How about me equating your money with glitch?
That's a tough question. I mean, and it snows when it's not supposed to, and in the summer it gets hot, you know, and sometimes the hamburger's overcooked, and my tailor makes the pants too short when they should be longer, and sometimes the ATM machine screws up. I think with all the serious problems we have in life, like poor Tanya, I mean, that's a serious situation. But this is not terribly important, so what the hell? This is only money.
For those joining us now, it's 4 minutes to 6 on Friday the 18th of February, watching the morning news from ITN. Now look at today's top stories. Western countries have cautiously welcomed reports that the Bosnian Serbs are withdrawing their siege weapons from around Sarajevo, but they say that Sunday night's deadline for NATO airstrikes still stands. UN observers in Sarajevo say convoys of guns are moving out of the NATO exclusion zone. The Bosnian Serbs say they'll be gone by tomorrow lunchtime, following yesterday's agreement between the Russian envoy Mr. Turkin and Bosnian Serb leader Radovan Karadzic. The British government claims Mr. Major helped arrange the Russian intervention when he met President Yeltsin in Moscow. The Prime Minister will be focusing on the state of the economy as he continues his visit to Scotland later today. Meanwhile, Labour says it's uncovered what it calls another massive Tory tax bombshell. It says the average family will be paying £22 a week more in tax in 1995. In Northern Ireland, a middle-aged man's been shot and critically wounded in North Belfast. He was gunned down at a house near the Antrim Road. It's understood that a number of children were in the house at the time. And that's all from the ITN Morning News team. There'll be bulletins throughout the day on ITV. The next main news is at 12:30. Meanwhile, from us, goodbye.
This is the Daz Doorstep Challenge. I'm Danny Baker. You are?
Jill Carter.
Do you use Daz Ultra?
Yes, I do.
How do you find it value-wise?
Very good.
And particularly on white. Does the trick? So happy you could show us something white right here and now. What's the story of this then, Jill?
A beautiful sparkling white bronze, but using not makeup all over the colour. I find using Daz Ultra. Brings all the makeup off.
And you're happy with that white?
Delighted. Beautiful.
Could you spin it round for us? Let's have a look at the other side. Would your white pass the Daz Doorstep Challenge? Jill's did. How you doing now?
Not in a half class, I tell you.
How do you tile round a window? Fast around a corner. Put an expert at your fingertips with DIY Profile. 2 complete courses to double your DIY potential. There's a step-by-step course of know-how, plus practical skill cards each week to help you on the job.
You did a good job there.
I had a little help.
DIY Profile, bumper part 1 out now, only 30p.
You have a good time with your girlfriend. You really have a good time and make new friends. Oh, exciting, crazy, crazy, crazy.
Now you can cut the cost of getting dishes cleaner than the eye can see with this new money-saving refill. It's a snip. Dishwasher Fairy cuts the cost of cleaning.
Don't be a square. Join the celebrities for a Friday night fun-filled fantasy quiz at 7 on Central.
There's a challenge later this evening on Central. Who will be the Queen of Gossip? Comedy from Surgical Spirit at 8:30.
Hello and welcome to GMTV this Friday morning, February the 18th, 6 o'clock. I'm Michael Wilson. A very good morning to you. Our top news story this morning, more British soldiers are on their way to Bosnia. The first plane load of troops flies out within the next half hour. Also in the programme, Torvill and Dean begin their quest for Olympic gold in Norway, complete with a new routine. And to assess their chances, champion skaters Karen Barber and Nikki Slater. They join me in 20 minutes' time here on the programme. And from icebound Norway to summer sunshine, join Amanda Reddington as she gets away from it all with a relaxing country break. And to help you on your way, it's your last chance this week to pocket £10,000 in our cash competition. All that and more right after the main national and international news from Penny Smith.
Airstrikes are less likely as more troops leave for Bosnia. How New Yorkers are persuaded to pay their parking fines. And for teacher Torvill and Dean, chasing an Olympic dream. Good morning. 60 British troops leave for Bosnia today amid hopes that airstrikes around Sarajevo can be avoided before Sunday's deadline expires. The radar specialists are trained to find heavy guns, but the Bosnian Serb forces have already begun a major withdrawal from the hills. That follows Russia's decision to send 400 troops to join the peacekeeping forces. The government's claiming Moscow's intervention is a diplomatic coup for John Major. This from our political reporter, Gavin Partington.
The decision to send 60 specialist British troops came as Bosnia's Serbs stepped up their withdrawal of heavy weapons from around Sarajevo. Russian diplomatic and military intervention appears to have convinced their longtime Serbian allies to respond to NATO's deadline. Government ministers suggest John Major encouraged the Russians to act when he met Boris Yeltsin in Moscow this week. Last night, Foreign Secretary Douglas Hurd said there was now a chance the war could end.
There is now a real prospect of a nightmare coming to an end. That's what we should fasten our eyes on and work in the next few days, weeks, to make sure that happens.
But the government's refusal to meet the demands from Britain's UN commander in Bosnia for 3,000 extra troops is still prompting criticism.
This government has now to get behind its commander in the field and do what needs to be done to make sure he has the resources he needs to do the job we've asked him to do.
The chance of peace in Sarajevo without airstrikes has raised hopes that Westminster at the UN may soon be able to restart humanitarian aid convoys, the peacekeeping role most MPs want British forces to perform. Gavin Partington, GMTV News.
30 men from the Royal Horse Artillery leave their base in North Yorkshire for Bosnia in an hour. Joining us now live is their commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel David Richards. Good morning.
Good morning.
What's the mood of your men as they prepare to leave for Sarajevo?
Well, I think when I told them a couple of days ago, it took them a little bit by surprise. But in fact, since then, they've set to with a real will, and morale is very high indeed, and they're very optimistic, undoubtedly.
What role will you be playing when you arrive?
Well, twofold, really. I think, assuming, as we all hope, that the threat to use air power is not implemented, these radars will go out there and are able to detect indirect fire weapons, such as mortars and guns. And that in itself, their very presence out there, will have a deterrent effect on the use of those weapons, in that those that might be likely to use them are presumably less likely to if they're aware that they will be rapidly detected. If things deteriorate and the threat to use air power has to be implemented, then obviously those radar systems can very rapidly detect the use of mortars and will be able to bring air much more accurately onto them.
Lieutenant Colonel David Richards, thank you very much for talking to us this morning.
Pleasure.
A 55-year-old Catholic man is critically ill in a Belfast hospital this morning after being shot in front of his 4 young grandchildren. The attack came just hours after a policeman was killed in an IRA rocket attack in Belfast, the IRA's first murder this year. This report from our island correspondent Alan Fisher.
North Belfast was again the scene of sectarian violence, this time the victim, a 55-year-old Catholic man babysitting his 4 young grandchildren. 2 gunmen got into the house in Skegnall through a back door and shot him in the neck in front of the shocked and horrified youngsters. The Loyalist attack is the latest in the recent upsurge in violence from both sides, but despite that, some believe peace is still a possibility.
Nobody yet has said they've rejected the declaration from Downing Street, and all I can add tonight is please, on behalf of the people of Northern Ireland, go for peace.
Less than 7 hours earlier, the IRA claimed their first victim of 1994. RUC Constable Johnson Beacom, a 30-year-old father of 3, killed when a rocket hit his Land Rover while on patrol in the markets area of Belfast.
This does not equate to a peace. But if you ask me optimistically, in overall terms, do I think that there may be some movement towards that? Just on balance, I do. But it's a very difficult way to explain it when I've got one officer dead and another 2 seriously injured.
John Major and Irish Premier Albert Reynolds meet tomorrow to discuss the progress the Downing Street Declaration has made. Against the backdrop of escalating violence from both sides, they'll be renewing the pressure on Sinn Féin to positively accept a document they firmly believe can finally end violence in Northern Ireland. Alan Fisher, GMTV News.
The tough stance of New York's sheriff in tackling fine dodgers has cost him his job. He's collected £60 million a year from people who owed the city almost £2 billion in unpaid parking tickets and other fines. But as Maxine Mawini reports, Philip Grimaldi's tactics have made him very unpopular.
This man didn't pay his parking tickets and fell foul of the sheriff from hell.
You can't get away with it any longer. It doesn't make sense to try and avoid it. It's going to happen, so pay it.
Philip Grimaldi is a sheriff with a mission. He's fast recovering the £2 billion New York City is owed in outstanding parking tickets, taxes and other fines. He's closed restaurants and given his 140 gun-slinging deputies a secret weapon. Computers which track car registrations, instantly recognizing offenders. Then it's pay up or be towed, and he doesn't care who owns the car.
We've taken a Rockefeller car. We've taken Spike Lee's car at least 3 or 4 times.
But unorthodox methods have been the downfall of this controversial sheriff, whose nicknames include Adolf Hitler. New York's new mayor has fired him.
Why live with someone who's so controversial?
Now the sheriff and his gun are for hire, and he's looking for a new city to clean up. Maxine Mawini, GMTV News.
There are fears that a landslide could wipe out a village in West Wales. A farm and 7 houses near Cardigan have already been damaged since the land began shifting a week ago. Geologists are urgently investigating the case, as our correspondent Sean Evans reports.
The Davis family has farmed at St Osmond since the turn of the century, but now their land is collapsing beneath them. The hill is slipping down towards the village. Already much of their land has become useless.
Maybe 10 Knoop farm won't be here Monday. It'll be down the bottom end of the village. I'm taking about 50 or so houses with it. I don't think anybody realizes